Very good morning to you all. I'm Julian Hubble and I head up sales and marketing for DrayTek UK. I'll be hosting this webinar alongside my technical colleague Joe DC, who is one of our technical account managers and is specialist in the VigorConnect product we're going to hear about today. So today's agenda is as follows. So after my introduction, we're going to just do a bit of a recap on the DrayTek wireless mesh solutions, a feature that is now a standard part of the access points that we bring to market. We're then going to talk about the VigorAP 802, which is a new access point that's kind of extended the range and I think is a welcome addition and perhaps opens up more environments where the DrayTek managed access point solution would be appropriate. My colleague Joe is then going to come in and talk through VigorConnect. This is a free piece of management software that you're all free to download and will effectively enable you to manage a Wi-Fi network from DrayTek. And then we're going to have a time for a Q&A at the end of it where you're all free to ask questions. So we estimate we'll be well within the hour on this particular webinar, and so we should be finished nicely by 11 o'clock this morning. Okay, so I'm now going to do a brief introduction into DrayTek wireless mesh, and there's a little diagram there that kind of explains it. So traditional sort of wireless kind of involves doing a survey of a site, finding out where the optimum place is to place access points, and traditionally you'd then cable those access points back to a router or some sort of management system. That involves doing the survey, laying cable. Sometimes that can be quite costly to do, and sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to do because you may have difficulties in drilling through walls and other issues you get associated with particularly older buildings that aren't perhaps previously wired up. So what mesh is all about is enabling you to connect lots of different access points within a building without the need to physically cable them back to the router or back to the source. So this allows for a very sort of flexible way of installing. So DrayTek Mesh Wireless, there's different types of hierarchy in the devices that we install, which I will cover a little bit later on. The important thing to note here that is once you've connected them to a power source and they're alive, so to speak, the rest of it is a fairly straightforward auto configuration of the network. All managed as a group. These devices become kind of self-healing and auto-optimizing. So if one device gets knocked out for any reason, or there's a particular bunch of traffic or something happening on one particular part of the building, the network kind of naturally works around that to make the most of the bandwidth available and trying to deliver the best that the users want. And as I say at the bottom there, it avoids running Cat6 cabling everywhere, which can be expensive and takes time to do. So absolutely right for a fairly small environment where there's maybe a fairly straightforward Wi-Fi requirement. So if you look at DrayTek Mesh Wi-Fi, the first thing I need to say is that there are different hierarchy in the different devices that you're managing. So if you look at the bottom there, you've got obviously a DrayTek router connecting you to the internet. Clearly we would recommend that you use a DrayTek router. However, I should also note that if it's not possible to use a DrayTek router, maybe that's already defined by some sort of managed service, this DrayTek Mesh Wi-Fi will work independently of the router, either in its own right as a mesh network or centrally managed through one of our management tools such as VigorConnect or ACS. So in terms of hierarchy, you have effectively a controller device which you connect to essentially set the network up. That device is called the mesh route, and you can see the mesh route at the bottom there. In this particular case, the mesh route is one of our VigorAP 903 wall-mounted access points. So you set your mesh route up, and connected to your mesh route, you can have a different category in the hierarchy called the mesh node. The mesh nodes are subordinate to the mesh route. They take their configurations from the mesh route. And as you can see on this diagram here, you can have a total of 8 access points working together in a mesh Wi-Fi configuration, 1 being the mesh route and up to 7 being mesh nodes. And as you can also see, you can have a number of different hops. So on the far right hand side, denoted by those kind of dotted line connections, you've got the first hop to the first mesh node, then a second hop to the second, and a third hop to the third. This is effectively scaling and extending the network up to 3 hops away from the mesh route. So you can have up to 7 access points attached to the mesh route, and you can have up to 3 hops per tree, if you like, as clearly shown in this diagram. And the method that the access points used to communicate with each other is using the dual band 5 gigahertz radio that's all shared by the clients. So that's fairly straightforward. Up to 8 access points in total, which probably for most small to medium sized organisations or home users or whatever, it's probably more than sufficient for most requirements, and up to 8 access points used together. Just a bit of a summary of the different access points that you get from DrayTek. You can see there's the AP 802, which is the second one down, which is a mesh capable device, which I'll explain in a moment. 2 down from that, you've got the VigorAP 903, which is the wall mounted device that acts as the mesh route. And right at the bottom, you've got the VigorAP 920, which is the ruggedized device, one that can be used outside in the car park or maybe to connect 2 external buildings together, that can also form part of this mesh family. You can see there are other devices there that we've sold over many years and connect together to make very successful wireless networks. But the mesh capable devices currently are the 802, the 903 and the 920, and you can expect more mesh capable devices coming through as we develop our product set. This is just a brief summary of how you set up in this case, a mesh route or the controller. Very simple to do. You download the DrayTek wireless app. You can click a wizard. It will search for a device. You can effectively connect that device to the app by using a simple QR code scan. Once you've done the QR code scan, if you look at the first image on the left hand side, this is scanned through as an AP 903. There's a standard admin account and password to get connected. You can then in the next phase set up the name of the group of access points you're going to connect together to form this network. In the next section, the third one along, you set up the SSID and the WEP key. So we've called this SID DrayMesh, and there's quite a long WEP key you would use that all the clients can use to get connected. You then select check and apply, and then you've effectively set up your mesh route, your controller. You've logged in. You've set up a new Wi-Fi name, an SSID name, and you've set the web password. So very simple to do, takes minutes to do, really anybody can do it. The next stage in the process is to add nodes, the subordinate devices that connect to this controller, or the mesh route as we call it. Again, you go into the wizard, you select add nodes. It will then search the network for all the nodes that it can see. So previously you'd have taken your access points, you'd have plugged them in, you'd have switched them on, and they're now kind of out there broadcasting, so to speak. Do the simple search. It will then run the search. It will find the devices, and then you can apply for these devices to become part of the overall network, and a basic kind of update will take place, and then shortly afterwards you will end up with a kind of hierarchy. So if you look at the far left hand screen there, you can see you've got the VigorAP 903 as the mesh route, and then you've got various other devices hanging off it. In this case it's the 920, which is the ruggedized device, but it could be other devices as well. Next screen on, you can see a nice simple overview of what your network looks like. You've got use of color indicating how well the signal is, so excellent, good, fair and offline, blue ranging down to red, and as you can see below, all these are denoted by a kind of blue dot indicating that the connection is very good. Very simply, you can see the amount of clients that are connected as well. And on the far right hand side, you can, on another screen, you can see what type of clients are connected. In this case, we've got an iPhone, a laptop, an iPad. You can see what sort of speeds they're connected at and so on. So really very straightforward to do. Really should be any of our installers or even a fairly savvy home user should be able to set up a network fairly quickly using this type of technology. So it's really all about getting things up and running very quickly using this VigorMesh solution. So that's an introduction into the mesh capability, which, as you can see, is available in 3 of our products and will be coming in more as we go through next year. I'm now going to do an introduction into the VigorAP 802, the latest of our access point products coming into the range. So I suppose this is literally a plug and play product. Plug because you literally plug it into the wall, and play because it kind of automatically becomes part of the network. So really the most easy, straightforward way of adding Wi-Fi to a building, or maybe extending Wi-Fi in a building. As you can see here, it's there's a few interfaces and a few lights to take into consideration. You've got the physical plug at the back, which just literally plugs into a power source, into a plough socket. There's nothing else to connect to it. It's a kind of self-sealed access point in one unit with a plug sticking out of it. You've got a kind of reset button at the bottom, denoted by 2. You simply click that to kind of reset the device, and then you've got a number of lights that can come on to indicate the status. So you've got, is it working or not? You've got the 2.4, the 5 gigahertz, is a cable connected, and so on. So a very, very straightforward indication of what's going on with the device. And number 4 at the bottom, you can see, is an interface. This is a gigabit Ethernet interface, which can be used for a number of reasons, and I'm going to explain that a little bit later on. So that's what it looks like coming out of the box. The plug device, a quick start guide, and a cable. Couldn't be simpler. So what are the key features on the VigorAP 802? First thing to say, it really is our smallest access point. Tiny little device. It's a plug and an AP combined in one, and really couldn't be easier to install in a network. So a number of things this can do. It can form part of the hierarchy of a mesh network. I should state now, this device here can become a mesh node, so it becomes subordinate to a kind of the mesh route, which typically would be an AP903 or could be another device as well. So you'd have the mesh route of AP903, and then you'd use the 902, the 802 as a mesh node, as an extension to the network. So it can form part of a mesh network. It can be an access point in its own right. You may just want one simple access point in a building. Maybe you've got a router that hasn't got wireless on it for some reason. You can simply attach that to a router and become an access point. And it can also be used to extend the range of an existing network. Got the 802.11 AC, so high-speed Wi-Fi. It's got the big gigabit LAN port on it, and it can be managed through the wizard that I showed you earlier on the app. It can be managed through VigorConnect, which Joe is going to explain a bit later on. It can also be managed by VigorACS, which is our more encompassing management system that works for access points, routers and switches, which we've done previous webinars on. In terms of managing it, those of you that are familiar with the AP903, you can see there's a very similar interface if you want to go into the management screen, and this has the same features as you'd expect on our other access points. So key features to highlight are band steering, which means that a client, iPhone or Android device or whatever, will be kind of forced to use the optimum Wi-Fi it has available to connect to the network, making sure you've got optimum performance. I've got a feature called airtime fairness, which essentially means if there's older legacy Wi-Fi being used, it's not allowed to hog bandwidth, so everybody gets a fair amount of bandwidth. Full use of the 5 gigahertz channels, so dual band and so on, to help avoid interference. You've got assisted mobility, or the ability for a device to roam between one device and another. You can manage mobile devices, so you can exclude certain operating systems, like you may want to exclude iOS or iPhones or certain Android devices, and it gives you a real monitor of what's going on the network to try and avoid interference, to make sure your network is running at the optimum mode. So I guess I might have introduced this as a fairly basic standard way of extending networks, but actually there's some really neat features built into this as well, as you'd expect in a DrayTek product. Here's a quick comparison between the VigorAP 802 and the 903. I think, as I said earlier on, the VigorAP 903 acts as the controller on a mesh network, or the mesh route as we call it. The VigorAP 802 acts subordinate to that as the mesh node. You've got a slightly different variants in wireless, but still very, very high speed and high spec. The 802 will support 2 SSIDs, which is the standard in most organizations. They'd want, the standard, office network and maybe the standard guest network. So will probably be appropriate for most environments. If you need 4 SSIDs, it's the AP 903 to go for. You can see the usage in clients as well. 32 clients per band on the 802 and 64 on the 903. The other thing to say is DHCP, so delivering AP addresses to the various clients. The 903 will act as a DHCP server, whereas the 802 doesn't, but more typically you probably have your router as the DHCP server, so it probably doesn't really affect this much at all. See what the radius features are. It's external for the 802 and internal external for the 903, and both can be managed by Vigor ACS and VigorConnect. So a slight difference between the two devices, and that chart just highlights those. So to sort of summarize the key features of the AP 802, conforms to the mesh Wi-Fi, makes it very easy to install, self-healing, and as I said earlier on, is a companion extension product to the AP 903 for a complete mesh network. It's self-configuring as a mesh node, and you configure it using the DrayTek wireless app. Really makes for low cost, very simple Wi-Fi deployment. You don't need cabling, you don't need licenses. It's very simply centrally managed, and it really couldn't be simpler to do. And just to finalize down there, this device uses both the 5 gigahertz dual band wireless spectrum as well as the 2.4 gigahertz band, so that can be used separately with different SSIDs for both if you wish. And to emphasize, it's the 5 gigahertz that is used for the mesh wireless link. So typical target users, as I sort of said earlier on, this is really designed for the small office, small business, home user. So I mean, actually ideal for a home user, because the plug and play element of these 802s does literally mean you can stick it in a plug in one room, have a look around the house, see if it works. If it doesn't seem to work correctly, you can literally unplug it and stick it in another plug and see if that works better. So really great for kind of trial and error. You don't have to commit yourself to cabling up and power over Ethernet switching and the rest of it. Really straightforward for, suck it and see, trial and error, making sure you've got the access points in the best possible place. So I think ideal for home, ideal for installers of home networks that may well be putting lots of other stuff in, maybe smart televisions, home cinemas, surround sound and stuff like that. All takes advantage of IP and Wi-Fi. This is a very simple way of delivering Wi-Fi to that particular home. Clearly, obviously, to small businesses as well, as I've kind of indicated, and it could be great for those users on a bit of a budget that just want a very cheap and cheerful 802.11ac access point. So example types of users, kind of emphasised this earlier on. A user that wants a mesh network and maybe wants to extend. In this particular example down here, we've got the mesh route, which is an AP 903. The first hop on the left is actually an Ethernet cable to a mesh node. So the mesh nodes can be connected by cable. If you've got cable, you may as well use it. If you've not got cable, obviously this is where the meshing kind of comes in place. So this could have been a network where you've got a 903 connected to an 802 using an Ethernet cable. You want to take it further. It's not easy to cable, so you could have 2 additional hops directly from the mesh route on the right with 2 mesh nodes, and maybe an additional hop from that 802 that's going to a mesh node that's out there a little bit further into the building. So couldn't be easier to expand the network using this type of technology. Another use for it, which I sort of indicated a little bit earlier on, we want to put Wi-Fi into a building. We've only got a Wi-Fi router. What do? Well, simply use the Ethernet cable, plug it into a LAN port on your router, connect that to the 802 and literally plug it into the wall and switch it on. And hey presto, you've got a Wi-Fi network. Couldn't be simpler. It can also be used for range extension. If you've got a router that maybe doesn't have mesh technology and you want to just take that network to perhaps an additional stage, again, you can put it in sort of extension mode and just extend the network using this type of technology. So again, a sort of get you out of trouble, pushing the network a little bit further in an environment could be another useful use for this particular device. Okay, that sort of summarises my introduction there. I've kind of covered a little bit about us, covered an introduction into mesh technology and shown you our latest product, the Vigor 802, great companion product for the AP 903, which I'm sure a lot of you already know. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pass over to Joe, who's going to take you through a relatively new product called VigorConnect, purely aimed at access point installations, free of charge, can be freely downloaded. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Joe.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this part of the presentation on VigorConnect. We will now be going through an alternative method of managing your DrayTek access points that are situated on a local network. So let's start looking into the introduction here. VigorConnect is a local network management software that will actually sit on a local network running on currently a Windows machine that is supported for VigorConnect at the moment. We are looking at supporting other operating systems as well, but the free download available on the UK site will give you a Windows install file. The demonstration I'll be going through on this presentation will be managing some of the access points you see below, that Vigor AP 802, the pluggable device, the Vigor AP 903 with the gigabit LAN ports available on the side and external antennas, and also the ceiling mount access point, the Vigor AP 910C. So we'll be using VigorConnect to make some configuration changes to these devices on the network. So a key thing with VigorConnect is this software actually allows us to manage up to 100 DrayTek VigorAPs on the network, which will suit many types of install and be very successful at easily deploying changes on the site and make total cost of ownership really there, managing the changes to all the access points, reduce that total cost of ownership. So here's some key features of VigorConnect. So first of all, very easy to install, and we will see that in the following slides. We have a very detailed network dashboards of each access point that can be brought up and get information of the wireless clients connecting to those access points, how the access points are used on site. We can easily discover access points and add them into our network, get feedback from VigorConnect in terms of activity, any devices that have gone offline, get alerts on that, and we can also see any kind of log entries of any changes that have been made on these devices from any user account that has accessed VigorConnect. We'll look into AP provisioning, so easily rolling out changes, and we'll highlight the key maintenance features that VigorConnect can also offer. So first of all, let's begin with the installation process. So as mentioned, this is a Windows software currently available, which can be downloaded from the DrayTek website. Very quick install. VigorConnect can be up and running within minutes. Just run that application and the wizard will bring you through all the necessary steps, and you will finally reach a setup page which allows you to actually change the default ports that are used for either HTTP or HTTPS, however you need to access VigorConnect there. And once this easy process has been completed, what you will actually be displayed with then is the browser will load up and bring you directly into VigorConnect. So it really is a quick install process, and you can see in the system tray on the Windows device here that the VigorConnect service is actually running as well. So when you first log into VigorConnect, you will actually be using the default credentials as displayed on the right hand side there for access into VigorConnect. Key thing to mention here is that you can create additional user profiles, and when you first actually log in with these default credentials, you will be prompted to actually change those admin passwords because they're currently the default settings on there. Also, you can enable two-factor authentication on the user accounts as well, so good control there. So once we've actually installed the software onto a local machine and we've got DrayTek access points on the local network, we will want to easily discover, find those access points and actually add them into VigorConnect. And VigorConnect will actually prompt you. There will be an option to say, do you want to run the wireless wizard and actually discover your access points? And that will actually bring you into the next screen here, which is the wireless wizard. So the example I mentioned, I've got 3 different access points there, the 802, 903 and 910C, and the wireless wizard will detect those devices on the local network that the VigorConnect is also part of. So you will see information of the IP address of those access points that's displayed and the actual model name of those devices as well. Now you can add these individually, or we can just easily select all, no matter how many devices are on the network that we wish to add. And there's 4 steps of this process that you can see at the top. So very quick way to adding the devices. So the next screen now that we follow on to is the actual wireless setup of the devices that we've selected. So we can change the default values that we have on the screen here to actually configure an SSID for the wireless name and the new wireless password. Additional settings that we have, if we expand the more options, we can enable a guest VLAN or guest wireless network and apply those settings to the access point. So this discovery and wireless wizard is a quick setup of your access points that you have on your local network. You'll get a summary of any changes that you're going to be making in this profile, and the next step is just simply to apply these settings to the access points. So in a short amount of time, you'll get a completed message to actually confirm that this has been successful. And on the top left, we'll be able to expand that network tree, and we'll now see that there's 3 devices actually now being managed by VigorConnect. And if we expand those, we can actually see the devices themselves. And we can see with the green icon there that these are online, they're currently responding, and VigorConnect can manage those devices as well. From this point here, we can actually select one of those individual access points. So we'll select the VigorAP 903, and that will bring up the actual dashboard for the access point itself. So we can get good detailed information on this particular access point that's situated on the local network. Get information of the actual firmware that's using, the uptime of the device, what's the actual LAN IP address of this device sitting on the network, and we can see any wireless clients that are connected to either its 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz radio there. So really useful information to pull off from their access point itself. The actual naming of the device can actually be changed through ACS as well. So we can go into the network management menu on the left hand side there, and it'll give you the opportunity to actually put a name for the device for the location of where that access point is. So something that's easy to reference. So we can also add new APs in an alternative way with VigorConnect, and this is quite useful actually for when any new further devices are added to the network at a later stage. When you're in the actual root network dashboard, you'll see on the far right there the actual new devices that VigorConnect can actually detect and has discovered. And again, you can either add them individually or select all of those devices at once and then add them into VigorConnect. So it's just another way of being able to add additional devices. So AP profiles, a very useful feature of VigorConnect. It allows you to apply very detailed configuration onto the access points themselves. So within the configuration menu on the left hand side, we have AP profiles, and we can add multiple profiles into VigorConnect and edit them from here. When we add a new profile, essentially we just give it a name just for reference. So we'll call it version 1 of our Wi-Fi setup at the site. We'll put the admin login for the device and the AP's password as well. Now, just to let you know, if you wanted to change the password of all the access points that you have on the local site, we've got 3 devices currently connected to a VigorConnect here. We can actually put the password here, and this profile will actually push that new password out to the devices on the units. Once the profile's been saved, we can then edit the profile to actually apply the configuration changes that we want to roll out. And here we can see the full configuration options available, whether it be the general setup to enable or disable specific radios or select certain channels to be used. We can specify the 4 available SSIDs here, any VLAN tags that might be necessary in any security, any airtime fairness, any mobile device management configuration, all can be done within this profile. So this is a very detailed way of being able to generate a profile. Once that profile is now available, we can then select which devices should actually receive the profile. We can do that by selecting them individually, or in the example here, we've actually applied the profile to a specific network, and all the devices below will actually receive the same profile that's assigned to the network there. Selecting apply, that configuration rollout is done immediately to all of those access points, and we get some feedback from VigorConnect in terms of what stage that is currently at. Very shortly, you actually get a success status and actually get information of when that profile was provisioned on the units themselves. So it's a good way to actually look back and identify, specific access points. Have they actually received a configuration profile added to them? One thing to just highlight as well while we're on the screen here, we have only one network currently specified here, the root network. It's very easy to organize access points in VigorConnect into different networks. Potentially you have a large site, VigorConnect can manage up to 100 access points, so you could potentially have network created for each floor of a building. Potentially, if it's a multi-floor building with access points throughout, you can easily maintain and manage those access points easily by putting them into different segmented folders. So additional features that VigorConnect can actually provide you is some monitoring and some maintenance. So I've highlighted some of the various options here. In terms of monitoring, VigorConnect can actually alert you if any of these access points are not responding. Potentially the power has been taken down to the access point, or if the access point has lost network access, then the device can no longer communicate with the server, VigorConnect, so VigorConnect will generate an alarm. So there's an example here on the screen where you can see that you can, for each network that you create, you can see the total that are online and any that are offline, and the alarm will display there. Also, we've got the network topology on the left-hand side there, the network tree, where we can see a clear indication, that red icon there, to say that the VigorConnect can no longer see this device on the network. So very easy way to identify any potential issues of any access points that have no longer on the network and could be potentially causing some Wi-Fi issues at site. Also, any events that take place through VigorConnect, multiple users that you can have in VigorConnect. If you log in, any changes that are made, all events will be recorded in VigorConnect there for auditing there, to check what the status is, any changes that have been made. You can always refer back to the logs. The floor plan, again, another nice useful feature. You can actually upload a schematic of an actual floor plan and actually position where the access points are for reference, especially if this is a larger building. This can be very useful to refer back to and understand the setup. If you are potentially going to be making any further changes, a new AP profile that you're rolling out with new configuration, you can easily refer back to the floor plan there. Also, there's the rogue AP detection, and this is very useful for understanding the local environment and which other devices are being used in the local environment. Each access point will be able to report back to VigorConnect of the other access points in the vicinity that it can detect, and that will be displayed, and you can manage that from the interface. In terms of maintenance, VigorConnect is very useful for keeping all of your devices in good state in terms of making sure that they're using the latest firmware. You can easily roll out firmware upgrade changes from VigorConnect, and these changes can be scheduled, so it's not going to affect the site during working hours. Potentially when the Wi-Fi is always going to be in use, you can actually schedule firmware upgrades out of hours here, and VigorConnect will automate those changes for you. Especially useful when you've got larger estates of access points on the network. And additionally, we've got the configuration backup. We can set scheduled profiles so that VigorConnect can regularly communicate to all of the access points on the network and actually store a backup on the PC running VigorConnect itself. So some really good features available on VigorConnect. Just a bit of a run through really today on those. And just to summarize those features, free software that you can actually download today from the DrayTek UK website, run on a local Windows PC that's also got some DrayTek access points on the local network. VigorConnect can very quickly allow you to discover those access points and manage those access points moving forward. So that brings me to the end of this part of the webinar, and we're going to move on to the questions and answers section. So I believe we've got Julian joining us again. Are you on the line, Julian?
I am indeed. Can you hear me okay?
I can do, yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much, Joe. So just to kind of summarize, hopefully those of you that know DrayTek quite well, or maybe recently come across this, hopefully you can see that we're adding more and more options to you in trying to help you install our products into all sorts of different types and sizes of sites. We've got the all-encompassing ACS2, thousands of sites, every single device that we do. We've got very simple DrayTek mesh that can be sorted out through an app, and pretty much anybody can do. And we've kind of got VigorConnect and other methods kind of sitting in the middle. So hopefully you can find there are different options that will suit the various environments that you're selling our DrayTek products into, and you'll see this as a valuable addition. So anyway, Joe, there were quite a number of questions that came up, which is always good to see. So while we wait for someone to maybe raise their hand, let me just sort of summarise some of the questions that seem to come up quite a bit. So first question, Joe, was can VigorMesh be configured without an iOS or Android app? In other words, I want to set up Mesh, but I may not want to download the app, or I may not have a smartphone to hand. So what's the answer to that question?
Yeah, so obviously the app is available for those platforms, but you can also configure the mesh directly from the access point that you wish to be the mesh route. So all the access points have their own web interface, so you'll log into the mesh route device, the IP address of that device, log into its web interface, and directly from the web interface of that access point you can configure the VigorMesh from there.
Cool. So yeah, the app makes it simple, but there are other ways of doing it through the interface, through the management interface, which is good to hear. The second question was, can you use? So I'm thinking that I think the inquirer is thinking about you may well have a DrayTek router that's already got wireless on it, and then you're going to add potentially the 903 and 802 in a kind of mesh scenario. So the question is, can you use the DrayTek router with wireless in conjunction with the wireless mesh that you may have set up with different access points at the same time?
Yes, so you'll be able to still have the router wireless in use. You probably want to have the same SSID on the router and pre-share key as you are having in the mesh environment, to allow the wireless clients to be able to use the same wireless network. So it is possible to still have that router still in place with the wireless enabled, but the router will not be part of that mesh configuration. But it can still coexist.
Okay, probably a related question there. Will mesh route be added to DrayTek routers? So I guess I've got a router. It's got wireless included in it. Can I use that as the mesh route and add mesh nodes to it? So I guess good question. So what will be the response to that?
Yeah, very good question. So as we've described today, currently a device like the AP903 will be the mesh route. We will be adding mesh route to the DrayTek routers, so you can have the DrayTek wireless router as the mesh route, and then have the access points as the mesh nodes. So that is coming. We just don't have any confirmation of time frame just at the moment.
Okay, so I guess a logical extension in some firmware release in the future, whatever, that might be added to the device. Okie dokes. Another one is about different management systems and sort of can you use them at the same time. So somebody's asking that may well have VigorACS. Can you use VigorACS and also VigorConnect at the same time? So obviously VigorACS being the management system that we use to manage all DrayTek devices. So switches, access points, and routers, and then you've got the VigorConnect that's just really focused on access points. So would it make sense to use them together, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So actually, people watching this webinar today may have noticed some similarities between VigorConnect and VigorACS. So both VigorConnect and VigorACS use the same management protocol to actually manage the DrayTek devices. So that would be TR069. So because of that, currently you would only be able to use one or the other, either VigorConnect or VigorACS, because the DrayTek devices will be registering to one of those servers, the PC running VigorConnect, or wherever you may have hosted VigorACS. So currently, not at the moment, but we are looking into ways of how we can still have both VigorConnect potentially managing just a single site, and also having those devices also in VigorACS. So something we're looking into at the moment.
Okay, that's cool. So there are a couple more actually, but I noticed we've got a gentleman that's raised his hand, so maybe we'll go and see if we can take a live question. So I've got I think Gordon Ray that's raised his hand. I'm just going to click on you. I wonder if Gordon, can you hear me?
Hello there. It was just a very quick, easy question.
Sure.
Will it work across a multi-site VPN? I have a client who I've had DrayTek routers in for years, but sadly they've been sold a Vodafone system.
Oh dear.
So I know, and I will have no access to their Cisco routers. Will I be able to just post up access points to each of my offices and manage them from one central point?
Okay, so I guess you're looking at the device, looking at the management system as kind of one site thing, and you're thinking, can you use VPN to connect it to other devices? Yeah, great question there, Joe. How would we respond to that?
Hi there, Gordon. So yes, in terms of VPN and discovering access points across a VPN, this is something that we currently are looking into with DrayTek, and we're looking to provide that potentially as an option. It's the current version that you will have, if you were to download, you will not be able to fully manage those devices across a VPN. This is currently just for, if the PC running VigorConnect is locally based on the same network. But yes, potentially in the future this could be an option.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm just going to mute you now. I think I just saw another question. The gentleman raised his hand. Just well, I'm trying to find that one. I think I'm going to go to Kieran Williamson next, but just hold one sec. So the other question I've got down here was about activations for VigorConnect. Is there some sort of activation key or whatever that you need to use to get VigorConnect going, or do you just literally download it and it's kind of away you go?
Yeah, good question. It's literally just as simple as I showed in the slides. You download the software, the executable file from the DrayTek website, run that file, and VigorConnect is up and running. There's no licenses to maintain. So yeah, very, very easy software to run.
Okay, Grant, so I'm just going to move to Kieran Williamson. I'm just going to unmute you now. So, Kieran, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. So my question is, if you have a network which is set up with a router that has the same SID as a mesh network, so that you've got a consistent SID across the building, is a Wi-Fi client going to automatically connect to the device with the strongest signal, regardless of whether that device is in the mesh or not?
Okay, yeah, I think I got that clearly. Joe, does that? Do you need any more clarification on that? Or can you launch straight into that?
I think I'm okay with that question there. So just to clarify, the router is providing wireless. The SSID is the same on the router as that of the mesh network that's been created with the DrayTek access points. In terms of the wireless clients moving between each access point and actually connecting to a device with the strongest signal, you would want to utilize a feature on the DrayTek's called AP assisted roaming. And essentially what that does is the access point, based on a threshold that you would set, the access point can actually disassociate a wireless client to encourage the device to connect to a device, an access point in the local network that the wireless client has a stronger signal to. So hopefully that might help with the question.
Does that answer your question?
Available on both the mesh and the routers?
So this is AP assisted roaming is available in the menu options of the access points, and it will be on the later routers as well.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great question. I think there's another question a little bit further down. Just bear with me 1 second. Got to scroll through a few here. Hang on a second. Yes, so I've got Paul Eckersley, so I'm just about to unmute you. Paul, we'd like to hear your question.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Hi. It's basically what it's regarding is with the Vigor AP 910. Obviously, that's quite kind of neat ceiling mounted, and obviously you can just stick it on the ceiling. Two parts of the question: is there any kind of plans to make the AP 910C part of the mesh, and if not, is there going to be a replacement for it?
Sure. I wonder whether, I don't know, Alex, I don't know if you're on the call, maybe this is something you may want to comment on. Yep. Hi, Alex. Yeah, so Alex is our, for those of you who don't know, Alex is our CTO. So, yeah, welcome, Alex.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so the 910C, there isn't any plans to add mesh to it on the mesh capability. It can work in VigorConnect, but the hardware doesn't support the mesh function. But we are in the process of bringing out some ceiling mounted APs that will support mesh. So we're going to be announcing those pretty soon. But yeah, they are going to be arriving kind of quite shortly, very early next year.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, I think that pretty much covers all the questions. I'm just kind of scrolling up and down now. So I think we're probably going to start to close things off. So unless anybody's got a question they'd like to ask, we'll probably wrap things up. So anything more to add from your perspective, Joe or Alex?
There was a couple of text-based questions.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, one of them was about hotspot functionality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if you can add some sort of hotspot where you're getting a guest user to kind of log in before they get access to the wireless, and the question is that available? I guess there's a few answers to that, which I can just kind of quickly run through. One is that the routers have hotspot built into them on some of the models, so you can use that in conjunction with the APs, and it's the router that then controls whether or not the client's able to get access to the internet. and there's a kind of a wizard that allows you to set up the look and feel on that. But also separately, if you wanted to, you can use external authentication to use a different hotspot portal provider. Someone like Purple Wi-Fi is one that we've used before, so you could get the router to then pass the kind of authentication off to the external provider that can then be part of your hotspot portal function for the wireless.
Yeah, I guess we're seeing sort of captive portal requirements coming up quite extensively now. So yeah, so just to summarise, you would need a DrayTek router for this, but if you've got a DrayTek router that should have the captive portal capability, but as Alex says, you can offload to a third party as well. So if you've got some requirements, please do let us know, and we can help talk you through the various options there.
Yeah, and something that's going to be coming is adding the hotspot stuff into VigorACS on the roadmap. So
awesome.
We're going to be adding that in the future.
Cool. And did you say there was one more, Alex?
There was one about just what's the default password for VigorACS, which is root and admin123 for anyone who kind of downloads and has to play with it, just to help with the initial setup.
Cool. Okay, Alex, well, I think we'll wrap things up now. We're nicely within the hour, which we promised we'd be. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. We do hope you'll find that useful. This will be kind of posted on our DrayTek.co.uk website, so can be viewed again in the future should you wish to come back and refer to it. Any questions, do let us know. Hope that gives you more insight into more of our access points mesh and how the company is progressing with new products. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Great selling, and we look forward to speaking to you at some stage in the future. Bye for now.